Okay, everyone, it's officially 8:30 p.m. My name's Ron, I'm an alcoholic. Welcome home. A couple quick announcements. Make this really simple. December 9th, we have a December to Remember Spiritual Banquet Conference. It's put on right here. It'll start at 9 a.m. It'll run to 9:30 p.m. There's flyers on the table. There's actually one taped to the wall, which you can take a picture of your phone. We'll pass around this clipboard, and if you just take a picture of it with your cell phone, you'll have a copy of the flyer to give to others, and maybe know exactly where everything is. It's on our Facebook page, of course. What else we got? Oh yes, yeah, our group has given away a lot of big books at treatment centers. We do a treatment center every Sunday night. There's tons of commitments to be had if you're interested in that. This is what this group's all about, giving back. Today we made a sizable contribution to the local food bank. So that's what we do at this group. It's all about service, and I'm going to need somebody for the coffee commitment. If somebody wants to help, it's a 2 or 3 person commitment. If you're interested in it, see us after the meeting. We've got a ton of stuff going on, and I probably forgot something. Oh, our hoodies, of course. We got our AA swag here. Our cost on them is $22 tonight. They're free with a $20 donation. See Brian, he's up at the front here. All right, it's time for the world's best chairperson. Let's welcome Nick up here.
Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Nick, and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome home. This is a 1-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday evening at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street in Doylestown, PA. Food and fellowship starts at 8 p.m., followed by our speaker at 8:30. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday at 7 p.m. to 7:30 right here. Please come early and join us. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teaching of the 12 steps. We record all speakers that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The group would like to welcome everyone, especially newcomers. Is there anyone new or from out of town that would like to introduce themselves with their first name? Yes, sir.
I'm Kyle.
Hey, Kyle, welcome. Okay, welcome to everybody. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with working knowledge of the 12 steps and is willing to sponsor, please raise your hands. Excellent. Are there any announcements for the floor for the good of AA? Our sister group is a big book study meeting that meets every Thursday at 7:30 just up the street at Salem UCC Church, 186 East Court Street, Doylestown. Coffee is on at 6:15. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who can't afford them can put donations in the jar on the table marked Big Book and CD donations. And all CDs are available free of charge. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown, and our Facebook group. Subscribe and share. You can find our speakers there, join our Facebook page, and keep informed and share upcoming events and meetings. And now with that, I have Daryl come up and read the Just for Today Prayer of Recovery.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Daryl, and I'm an alcoholic. Just for today, prayer of recovery. Just for today, I will be agreeable. I will look as well as I can, dress becomingly, talk low, act courteously, criticize not one bit, find not fault with anything. I'm sorry about that. And try not to improve or regulate anybody except myself. And I have Mike to come up here and read the preamble.
I'm Mike. I'm an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. With that, I'd like to welcome Christina to read the steps.
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm an alcoholic. And this is the 12 steps. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
The 7 tradition. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supported and declining outside contributions. At this time, we'd like to pass the baskets. We have no dues or fees, but we do have expenses, and this group provides many services. Your donations cover food, rent, big books, CDs, events, and workshops. There is absolutely no smoking on church property. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and try to limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. Now, to introduce our speaker, a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group. Tonight we have Steve C. from New Jersey, from the Friends of Bill W. Club Group.
My name is Steve and I'm an alcoholic. And my sobriety date is January 26, 2018. And I am grateful to be alive today. And I hope you guys are too, because there was a time in my life where I wasn't. And, today I get to wake up in the morning, I get to hug my girls. I live in a house full of females. My friends lovingly call it Lake Estrogen, right? And they always ask me, how's life on the lake? And it's great. It's great. But there was a time where it wasn't, and that's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. And, AA saved my life. This program saved my life, but it took me a long time. It took me many years. I was talking to Nick before, and I came into AA 11 years ago, and hopefully I'll have 6 years this coming January. And it was a long struggle. Those 5 years of when I first got here and when I really got this thing, it was a deep struggle. Obviously, it was a struggle before that, but, really just letting go, man, like giving up. I remember going to my first rehab, and the counselor, he was like super excited and like all up in your face. And he goes, "Are you ready to give up?" I'm like, "I give up what?" He's like, "Everything." I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready to give up everything. But I needed to, and I didn't understand what that looked like until years later. I'm the kind of alcoholic of the hopeless variety. I was a guy who, at one point, I was, 24/7. When I woke up in the morning, in between taking a piss and brushing my teeth, I was getting loaded for the day, and I was staying loaded for the day. And there was no other option. There was zero options. Whether I wanted to or not, that's what was happening. And I would lie, cheat, steal, con, manipulate, and deceive whoever I had to get where I needed to go and get what I needed to get. And it was an ugly ass existence. Excuse my language. But that's how it was for a long time. I was the guy who would show up at my parents' house for a party at 11 o'clock, and I'd be drunk by 12. And one day, my mom took away my keys as we were waiting for other guests to arrive, and my little niece, my 3-year-old niece, I was so drunk, I stumbled over her. She fell down, cracked her head on the concrete, had a concussion, and my dad slapped me across the face. And I went inside, and I grabbed the keys, and I left. And for the next 2 weeks, I never asked about how my niece was. I didn't know she went to the hospital. I didn't care she went to the hospital. The only thing I cared about was my dad disrespected me in front of other people, slapping me across the face. I'm the kind of drunk who, when my wife was giving birth to our first child, I left her at the hospital. I remember the night before she was going to be induced. She was 10 days late. And I remember for the first time ever, sincerely praying, God, please help me. Please let this little girl be the answer, because I can't stop, and I need to be a father. This little girl's going to need a father. And the next day I get to the hospital, and at 12 o'clock they start inducing my wife, and by 1 o'clock I'm gone. And I leave her there for 4 hours. And I come back and I get to see my daughter born. Come to find out later, that was one of the most embarrassing things I ever did to my wife. It was one of the most hurtful things. I'm the kind of guy who had success in my 20s, had everything paid off by the time I was 30. And by the time I was 31, I was jobless and living in my car. And by the time I was 32, I was homeless and panhandling in front of a store in the south side of Bethlehem, as I'm living in a sober house, trying to get what I need to get in order to survive another day. I can't stress the hopeless feature enough. When you're waking up every morning and you're drinking against your will, and every fiber in your body wants you to stop, and you just can't, and you can't, and it just defeats you a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. And I'm the drunk who's been to half a dozen rehabs. I've spent over 9 months of my life in inpatient rehabs. I spent another couple months in halfway houses. I spent over 2 years in sober houses. I've done the tour, right, from here to California, Pennsylvania, all over the place. None of that helped me. None of it. I was at this rehab. The majority of rehabs I went to, I either got kicked out of or I left. Because every time I put down a drink, the obsession was so strong. It was so strong, I just had to go. So I'm in this one rehab at the detox, right? And I'm there for 5 days, and I had to go, so I left, right? And my friend came and picked me up, and the next day he brought me back. And then I go to this long-term facility a week later, and I'm in this rehab now. And now I'm like, I gotta go, right? I gotta go. I got no car, I got no money, no nothing. And I'm calling all these places. I'm like, how am I going to get out of here? This is before the times of Uber and whatnot. And I'm like, all right, I have this plan. My plan is I'm going to steal a bike from the rehab, and under the cover of darkness, I'm going to go to a U-Haul company that's like 7 miles away. Mind you, I'm in Westfield, Pennsylvania, which is like the middle of nowhere, right? There's like nothing around. It's just mountains. And then I had this brilliant idea. Pick Enterprise, they'll pick you up, right? So I called Enterprise, and they picked me up at the rehab. And when I tell you, I had every intention of ending my life that night. I'm dead serious. The amount of pain and torture I put my family through, and they would not leave me. They told me to leave, but they would not leave me. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I could not do it, And I left that rehab, and they picked me up, and they brought me back down to the station, right? And, the guy's like filling out the forms, and he's looking at my license, and he's like, what are you doing here? Right? Because he sees I'm from Jersey, like 4 hours away. And for whatever reason, I had like an honest moment. I was like, I'm out of rehab. And he's like, why are you leaving? And then the dishonesty came right back. And it's like, I don't know, my sister had cancer or whatever I said. And he stops, and he looks at my license, and he looks at me, and he goes, I just celebrated 2 years last week. And I don't think you should leave. And, that man took me outside and we talked for about an hour. And he told me about his journey. He told me how his kids almost drowned in the pool when he was drunk watching them one day. And now he sits out in the yard, in the front yard, in the grass with his daughter, and they just stare at the clouds all day. And he says the best thing. It's the best thing ever. And I thought that was kind of stupid. But I believed him. I could feel his emotion when he was sharing with me. And he talked me off the ledge, and I did leave that night, but I came back. And I don't know for sure, but I like to think that guy saved my life, And when I got back to the rehab, I wrote that guy a letter. And when they came and picked up the car, I gave it to the guy, and I said, give this to Jason when you get back to the shop, and he did. And 3 days later, that obsession was back. And I had to leave again, and I called Enterprise, and they would not rent me a car. And we had a little argument. I was like, I'm a paying customer. He was like, no, you're suicidal. I even have a note that says you were going to go kill yourself. I was like, I'm pretty sure my manager will agree with me to not lend you a car to someone who's suicidal. All right, great. So after about 24 calls later, I finally found this taxi company in Newark to come pick me up. It was a $750 taxi ride. And I got out of there. When I tell you the obsession was bad, it was bad. That I had to go. That's like my motto. I got to go. And I got to go now. And that was my life for a long time. Just back and forth, and hospital trips and failed attempts and just over and over and over, trying to do things the way I wanted to do things, And I was hanging around AA, but I was not hearing AA. I just wasn't hearing it. I'm sure I ran into people, some big book thumpers. I'm sure I ran into the people not into the big book, but I wasn't hearing them. I just wasn't hearing anybody. And it took a toll, My wife, she kicked me out of the house, and she wouldn't let me see our daughter, and that's how it was for a while, And I remember getting a visitation from my daughter one day when I was living in a sober house. And my wife said, I'll bring our daughter for her birthday. She was about 2 or 3 at the time, to come see you if you're good. If you're not good, tell me. I will not come. And she gave me a week's notice. And Saturday, couldn't stop. Sunday, couldn't stop. Monday, couldn't stop. Tuesday, couldn't stop. Oh, we're getting closer. Wednesday, couldn't stop. Thursday, couldn't stop. And the day finally comes, and she said, all right, I'm going to come up. Are you good? And I said, yeah, I'm good. And I was not good. I had no courage to be honest about anything I was doing. I didn't even have the decency to tell this woman, I'm not good. I know for sure, as soon as she gets there, she's going to know I'm not good. And she's going to turn around and leave. And that's what happened. She brings this little girl who's all dolled up, hadn't seen her dad in 2 months. Hair's done, in this nice new outfit. And I see her get out of the car, and she runs over screaming, Daddy, Daddy, and gives me a hug. And my wife looks, takes one look at me, and she's like, yeah, I can't believe you. Why would you do this to her? Why would you do this to her? And she scoops her back up, goes right back in the car and leaves. And that kid's just looking at me like, what is going on? What is going on? It's, man, the blameless children, you know what I mean? It's tough. It's tough. And I kept struggling. The obsession. Every time I stopped, man, I'd get a couple days, I'd get a week, and it would just be back at it. I had nothing. I had no solution. I had nothing. And, over time, I started taking a Vivitrol shot, and that kind of helped me. I knew I couldn't drink, and I was able to gather up some time, and I was in and out of the rooms again, just kind of showing up. And we were talking about before, I was around it, I wasn't in it, and eventually, it got to a point. I put together 2 years of abstinence, 2 years of just white knuckling that. trying to get through. And eventually I was allowed back into my house, and one day I just couldn't take it. I couldn't take it, and I got a call from an old guy, and he offered some stuff that I never took. I was never a cocaine guy. But that day, I was a cocaine guy. And, I took this ride, right? And I took this ride to go meet him after work. And that whole half an hour drive, I'm just gripping the steering wheel, saying, this is not going to be good. This is not going to be good. This is not going to be good. The whole ride there and the whole ride home doing the same thing. This is not going to be good. This is not going to be good. And I was just completely powerless, and I think that day I realized what step one was. I had known I couldn't pick up, but being driven like that, being absolutely driven with nothing, I got nothing. I got no defense here. Like I'm going, with 2 years. And I made it back to the house, and I went upstairs and I locked myself in the bathroom. And I did what I did, and I immediately fell out, and I hit the floor, and my wife and my 5-year-old girl at the time heard me hit the floor from downstairs. And they came upstairs, and my wife had to literally kick the door down to get to me. And there I lay on the floor convulsing with blood coming out of my mouth. And for the first time ever, this little girl got to see the effects of this disease on her father. Basically dead, laying on the floor. And I don't remember much from that night, but I do remember this. I do remember waking up and getting carted off in the ambulance. And I remember, probably to the day that I die, the screams and cries of that little girl, screaming, I want my daddy, I want my daddy, as I'm getting carted off in an ambulance. And in that moment, something happened. Something happened. I finally saw the true consequences of this disease and the effects of it and what it does to the people around me. It's not the self-centered consequences. It's not what it does to me. It's not losing jobs. It's not hospital visits. It's not getting arrested. It's none of that stuff. It's what it does to the people around us. And I felt, saw, and heard that night exactly what this disease does. My wife kicked me out of the house again, and the next morning, she called me and she's talking to me, she's yelling at me, why would you do this, why would you do this? And she said, do you remember what your daughter said to you yesterday? And I had to stop and think about it, and as I was getting ready for work that morning, I picked up my little girl, my little 5-year-old girl sitting at her arts and crafts table, and she's praying, and she's saying, God, please don't let my dad go to heaven on the day that I relapsed. We are not religious. We don't go to church. I never taught that child how to pray. But for whatever reason, in 2 years sobriety, a 5-year-old girl took it upon herself to pray that her dad does not die on the day that I should have been dead. Because that night when I got to the hospital after that relapse, my heart rate was still over 200 an hour later, unconscious for 20 minutes before the ambulance got there. That little girl, for whatever reason, felt something, and said something. And in that moment, I remember the night before we went to the hospital before that girl was born, I remember praying, God, please let this little girl be the answer. And he answered that prayer. It took 5 years. But he answered that prayer. That little girl was the answer. And since that day, that obsession has been gone. Gone. Steps 1, 2, and 3 for me were a gift. An absolute gift. I was always agnostic. That was one of the things in the program that I didn't necessarily agree with. Today, you can't convince me there ain't no God today. It's cool with whatever you want to believe in. I'm cool with that. You're cool with that. I know there's something out there, because how do you go from thinking about this 24/7 and being owned by this disease and this drink to nothing in an instant? What I felt that day in that 24-hour period was empathy like I've never felt empathy in my entire life. And how I look at the program today, it's like this is what it's designed for. for me, this is how I see it's designed. It's designed so that we see other people and we help other people. The whole step process for me is getting rid of me so I can finally see what the heck is going on around me. You know what I mean? And that's how it works for me. You know, one of the greatest gifts I have today is working with these guys. I absolutely love it. I like speaking. It's cool. I'd much rather be in the trenches, though. I love working with guys. I love seeing families reunited. I love seeing kids turn into fathers. You know what I mean? I was a kid. I turned into a father eventually. But since that day, I've just been running. You know, I've been running and running hard towards recovery. And I started hearing things. I started hearing things in meetings, like things that actually helped me. You know, like step work and service and doing all this stuff. And it's been an absolute blessing in my life. You know, an absolute blessing. And that journey through the step process has, man, I got so many awesome, powerful stories, you know, about this step process. I had this massive resentment towards my father, my biological father. When I was 2 years old, my parents got divorced, and I never really saw my father after that. You know, my mom got remarried a year later. He's a great guy. He was a good dad, you know, but I couldn't see he was a good dad. All I kept seeing was my biological father never came to visit me. You know, I saw him maybe twice after my parents got divorced, never called, never nothing, you know. And I had this nasty resentment towards him, this anger that I just carried and I carried and I carried. And finally, when I was 17 years old, he passed away. And me and my sister and my mom went to Saratoga, New York to go to his funeral. And it was a strange experience. You know, half the people there didn't even know he had kids. You know, I'm being introduced to some of his friends, and they're looking at me like, I had no idea Mike had kids. You know, and I'm just getting more and more pissed the longer I'm at this funeral. Like, how would he not tell anybody he's got kids? You know, I'm like just solidifying all these nasty thoughts in my head that I have about this guy. And then this little boy comes up to the stage, and, you know, he kind of eulogizes my dad. And he's crying, and he's talking about how much of a father my dad was to him, and how much all this time they spent together, and they did fishing and all these fun activities. And I'm just like, oh my God, what an absolute pile of dog crap this guy is, you know? Like, you do this for some other kid, but you wouldn't do it for your own kids? Like, what is that? What is that? And I carried that resentment for a very long time, you know, and when I finally started doing inventory, we approached it, we went at it. You know, I got this resentment towards my dad, and I got to this fourth column, and what's my mistake in this? And the first time I did it in inventory, I really couldn't see my mistake. I couldn't see anything other than like, all right, I'm just angry. And I'm carrying this resentment for a very long time, and I won't let it go, and I won't forgive, but why should I forgive? Why would you forgive this guy? And, the second time I went through inventory, I started seeing a little bit more. You know, I started seeing that I am just like that man. I am a carbon copy of this man. The only difference is I got back with my family. I wanted to get back with my family. You know, for the first 5 years of my daughter's life, I wasn't present. Whether I was in and out of rehab, sober livings, the whole nine, whether I was abstinent and just not present, I wasn't there. You know, and then I started thinking hypotheticals and theoreticals, and, you know, if I was in his shoes, you know, my father loved fishing more than he did his family. I love alcohol more than I love my family, and that's just the truth. You know, because if I loved my family, I would have given up alcohol a long time ago. And so I'm just like him in that respect. And then I was thinking, all right, now if I was in his shoes, and my wife left me, and took the kid 3 hours away, and remarried a year later, would I be able to eat my pride and go visit my kids when some other guy is doing my job? Would I? I have no idea. You know, and that was the answer I got at the time when I was doing inventory. I don't know. I would like to think that I would be a big man and go there, but I don't know. And I started gaining some compassion for this guy. And I also saw I not once reached out to him. Not once. You know, at 17 years old, I'm old enough to pick up the phone. 16, 15, 14, 13. If I really wanted to reach out to him, I could have. You know, so that's one of my mistakes too. And I started getting to this place of compassion, you know, where I could understand, okay, this guy was sick just like me. Thankfully, I made out of it. You know, he didn't get out of it. And then I started looking at that little boy like, you know what? I help people. I help people today. It's one of the most commendable things you could do in life, for me, is to help somebody. He had such a positive impact on this little kid's life that he was at his funeral crying. You know, how awesome is that? How awesome is that? But at first I didn't see it as awesome. And how awesome is it that my stepdad is an amazing father, which I never saw. I never saw until I sat down and started doing inventory, that he was at every single one of my games, every single one of my school functions. He treats my mom like a queen. He raised his kids, who technically aren't even his kids, like they're his own. Wow, what a gift. So my father leaving was actually probably one of the greatest things that ever happened to my mom. You know, but I don't see that. I see it now because you guys helped me see it. You know what I mean? In the step process, you guys showed me a different perspective. And that's what we're doing in the fourth step. That's what I was doing. I was finally seeing things in a different light. You know, I had a resentment towards my wife. And my sponsor sits down and he's like, all right, you got a resentment towards your wife. Why? He said, she enabled me. And he's like, and he starts laughing, just like you guys did, because it's funny. But this is my truth at the time. She enabled me. She was delusional. She should have known. She should have known years ago, with all this money going, that I had an issue. But she just turned a blind eye to it, you know? So he laughs, and he goes, all right, just so we're on the same page, you resent your wife because you're doing everything in your power to kill yourself on a daily basis, and she's doing everything in her power to try to save your ass. And you resent her for that? I'm like, well, you put it that way. I guess I don't resent her anymore. And then I had a sober resentment. This is the one that kind of blew up my inventory. I look at inventory today like a game of Jenga, right? We're stacking up all these resentments. This is my experience with inventory, at least. And slowly but surely, you're pulling them all out. And as you're pulling them out, there's going to be one. There's going to be one that's going to completely destroy your perspective. And it's going to give you a brand new one. And mine was a sober resentment. One of the things I tell my guys when we do inventory, I say, give me something sober, right? And a lot of people don't, depending on how fast you go through inventory, right? If you like to go through quick, guy gets sober, all right, next week we're going to start inventory. You don't have a lot of sober time to draw from. But if a guy's got some time, he's going to be mad at somebody. We're alcoholics. You know what I mean? We'll forget a miracle in 5 minutes, but we'll definitely remember a resentment for the next 20 years. It's like guaranteed. So I had a sober resentment towards my boss. And my sponsor was sitting down. He had like a kind of back to basics format. You know, it wasn't like I sit down and write it. We were just kind of going on the fly, and the way he does it, he just kind of interviews you. It's a Q&A, which I kind of like, because it doesn't give me time to come up with a defense, right? As to why I have no mistakes here. I got nothing. And he's a great interviewer. He knows what questions to ask. And, you know, he's like, all right, why do you got the resentment? Well, he said he was going to do this, and it never happened. You know, it was trivial. It was nothing big. And he just started asking me all these questions. Does a guy ever hurt you? Does a guy support you? How are you at work? You know, do you take extra time on your breaks? Do you take extra time on your lunches and this and that? And he's kind of working me into a way to make me look like I'm not a great employee. Right? But then also at the same time, he's like, well, what has your boss done for you? Has he helped you? Has he ever written you up for anything? Does he give you vacation time when you need it? Does he support you? And he's listing all these good things. All these good things that I don't ever look at. because I got this cynical, negative mindset. Always. I'm always looking for the negative to attach on and just hold on to it and be like, nah, this is your identity. This is your identity because I want it to be your identity. I want to be mad at you. And he just absolutely crushed every thought that I had about this man. And by the time we were done with that part of the inventory, I saw an amazing guy. I'm like, here's a guy who's done nothing but support me the whole time, giving me a second chance. I actually left that job because I got hurt. I was out of work for 2 years due to this disease. And he brought me back right away. And he helped me, gave me a second chance. And yeah, that one did it. That one really made me realize that I can't trust my brain. And a lot of the thoughts I have about myself and other people aren't true. One of the most powerful words in the big book for me is seemingly. Right? Because there was a time in my life where I was hopeless, seemingly. And there was a time in my life where people were a-holes, and I hated people, seemingly. You know what I mean? What I thought to be true is no longer true. If you would have asked me, are you going to die from this disease? 6 years ago, I would have said, yeah, I'm going to die from this disease. Seemingly hopeless. Today I'm not. And that's kind of what I found in the 4-step. Like all these things that I thought to be true got smashed. And they got smashed hard. And, doing that 5th step with my sponsor, and actually being honest with somebody and forming a relationship with him, I know our book says, like the reason we do a 5th step is, to form a relationship with our Creator. And I kind of see AA and the fellowship and the steps, it's like a menage a trois, you kind of need all three. You need like me, you, and whatever you call God. I need all three. Without all three, it don't work. It don't work. I need another living, breathing human being to come into the picture. I need another living, breathing human being to help. That's another thing I learned in the 4th step. I got a lot of people problems. You ever notice that? Resentments, people. Institutions, run by people. Traffic, people and cars. It's a lot of people problems. My defects I practice on people. People. I make amends to people. In 10 and 11, I look at how I'm treating people. In 12, I'm helping people. It's a lot of people, people problems, people solutions. 6 and 7, right? So, are you entirely ready? I can tell you what, I was entirely ready to have God remove the defect of drinking the night before I went to the hospital when my daughter was born. I've never been entirely ready to have another defect removed as much as I've had that one. I've been ready. I've hurt people in sobriety. I've lied, I've cheated, I've stolen. I've stolen things. After I hurt people, I'm usually entirely ready. But there's a lot of arm pulling and pushing and shoving to get me to that place. I don't just wake up one day and be like, yeah, I'm ready to be honest today. God, please remove the dishonesty. It's like, no, I'm like a learn it the hard way guy to the end. To the end, but I'm getting better. I'm catching stuff before I practice it. And I humbly asked him. That was the most humble I've ever been was that night before the hospital. He can remove it. It's been removed. I'll think about it today. I've gone to the liquor store for a reprieve. My daughter had a birthday party a couple years ago, and my wife is crazy, right? She's just like over the top. And she bought all these like blow up bouncy houses and water slides and stuff, and like 2 of each. Like we really need 2 of each? Like this is nuts. And so in the morning I'm like blowing all this stuff up and I'm pissed off, right? Because like, wow, you got 2 of each, whatever. And I'm blowing this stuff off and I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna rage out in a minute. I gotta leave. I got to pause. It is like my 10th step at work. I got to pause. I got to take a time out. I got to leave before I say or do something stupid. And what do I have to do? I got to get ice. I got to get a couple beers for our guests. So what do? I go to the liquor store. And I'm at the liquor store and I'm buying all this stuff and now I'm pissed off. I'm spending money on liquor, right? And I call somebody. And we talk. And he talks me off the ledge. And I go back and I finish blowing everything up. And it's a great party. And then after the party, I'm like, wow, I literally just went to a liquor store for relief. How amazing is that? You know what I mean? Ain't that a change? Ain't that a change? Two of my best spiritual teachers are my kids. I have an 11-year-old girl and a 4-year-old girl. And these girls are absolutely amazing. It's I love Dad all day, every single day. They're obsessed with me. And I'm so proud to be their father. And I'm so proud and thankful to be there, to be their father. And they teach me a lot. These little kids, man. Some of the 10 steps I get from this little 4-year-old are the absolute best. There was one time where, she wanted ice cream like first thing in the morning. I'm like, no, you can't have ice cream now. You got to at least eat breakfast first, And she's like, Dad, you're so annoying. You're so hurtful. Blah, blah, blah. And she's saying all these things to me. And I'm like, that's not nice, And she left the room and she went to her room. And 30 seconds later, she comes out and she's like, Dad, I'm sorry. I love you, Dad. I didn't mean that. But you're annoying. I'm like, all right, well, that's kind of a half-ass amends. Like, why don't you go get a black crayon and a piece of paper, we're going to sit down, write a little inventory. Resentment's the number one offender, we can't have this. We'll work you through it, we'll get you through the steps, But she's just amazing, Every morning she gets up, she looks out the window, and she sees if my truck is there. And if my truck is there, she's over the moon. Work days are kind of rough for her. My truck is never there. Dad actually has a job and he supports his family today, which is a beautiful thing. But those little girls, man, they're so sweet. If you ever meet my kids, they're some of the most polite, sweet, caring, kind kids you'll meet. It's not for me, it's for my wife. But I try to help a little bit too. Have a positive influence, and I do have a positive influence. I'm not giving myself any credit, which I'm good at. But these kids are my lifeblood, man. They get me through the day. They get me through the day just as much as AA and all the people in it do. And I've had to do, I had to make many amends to them too at times. I've said things and done things to them that I shouldn't have. Whether out of anger or frustration or impatience. But I'm not perfect. I'll stand up here and admit I'm not perfect. But I work towards it. I work towards it a lot. And, 10 and 11 for me have been extremely powerful tools. At our home group, one of the days we do a daily reflections. And we read 7 days worth of daily reflections. And 7 different people will read. And this was kind of like my first introduction to fear of people in 10th step, And I'm sitting down there, and we're at this meeting, and there's like 4 readings over for me, right? So I'm counting like, all right, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to be the 5th reading today. So while everybody else is reading and sharing, I'm going ahead in the book, and I'm reading ahead to what day I have to read. And I'm trying to concoct, this beautiful, elegant speech to give for my reading, because I don't want to look like an idiot. And the guy next to me is like, you can't do that. You can't read ahead. It's cheating. And I looked at that night, the 11th step, going through my day, right? And that was a little embarrassing for me in that moment, because he called me out on something. He didn't know. He was just teasing me. But he called me out on something. He caught me in a fear. And the fear was, I didn't want to look like an idiot. I wanted to have something to say. I wanted to have something good to say. And That's that fear of people, that fear of being judged. I never saw that in the 9-step promises. You kind of gloss over it. Fear of people, what does that even mean? Like, I'm afraid of your judgment. That's what it means. I'm afraid to open up a book on the fly, read it, and then not have an answer. That's fear of people. And while I'm having this fear of people, I'm not paying attention to anything you guys are doing. So not only is that fear like, I have this fear of people, it's like I'm being disrespectful to you guys because of my own self-centered fear. I'm not paying attention. I'm not listening to any shares. And it was so cool for me to see that for the first time. Actually catch myself. Somebody pointed out and catch myself in the act. Like, I was like, oh, that's what we're looking for on a daily basis. We're looking for stuff like that. And once I started looking, I started seeing all kinds of stuff. All kinds of stuff. I went on this commitment with my buddy down in Trenton. And after the commitment, this guy comes up to us and he's like, after every commitment, I go to the flower shop and I buy flowers for my wife. Would you guys like to come? And my buddy said, no, I'm going to go to the bakery and get her some stuff. And I was like, that's a good idea. Go get my wife some flowers. And right after he said no, I said no, even though I thought it was a good idea. And that night, going through my 11th step, I'm reviewing my day, right? I see that fear again crop up, that fear of people. It's like, why do I do the things I do? Why am I going against what I think is a good idea? It was a good idea to go get flowers. Why did I just say no? Why did I just cave? And it was so eye-opening for me that I just fall into line. I just fall into line. It's like, whatever you're doing, I'm following, whether I want to do it or not. So how do you make up for that? It's like, you be more aware, right? The next day I went out and I got flowers for my wife and I brought it home and I was like, all right, now I'm going to start paying attention to what I'm doing. What am I following? Am I following that voice in my head? Am I being guided by that? Or am I being influenced by other people? It's not that he was a negative influence at all. He wasn't. Again, I was just falling into line. I had a cousin who came into the program. And I found out she had problems, right? And I found out she was going to Narcotics Anonymous, and me, I've spent a little bit of time in there back in the day, and I was like, I gotta get her out of there. The place is no good. I know a better place. It was a different letter, but it's better. And then I find out she's got a boyfriend. She's like, 2 months sober. I'm like, yeah, this is not good. And found out the boyfriend's got 6-7 years in the program. I'm like, yeah, this is definitely not good. And come to find out, it's, she had been sexually assaulted, a month prior by one of the members over there. And I was like, I got to get her out of there, And, this guy was 28 years old, I think he was. And my cousin's 17. And immediately my mind just goes, all right, we're going to find a place in the backyard. I'm going to start digging now. And, we're going to take care of this guy. We're going to get rid of him. And for 2 days, I was brainstorming. I was the brainstorm, coming up with all these crazy ideas of how I was going to kill him or how I was going to beat him up and what I was going to say to him and all this other stuff. And then finally, I was talking to my friend, and I told her the story, and she gave me a different perspective on things. And I talked to a couple other females in the program, and they gave me a different perspective on things. And basically what they told me was, do you want to support her or do you want to hurt her? Because she's going to do what she's going to do. You ain't going to break up that. You ain't going to take her to AA. You ain't going to kidnap her and take her to AA. She's going to do what she's going to do. She's like, when's the last time you've listened to anybody who told you what to do? Besides, never. So I grabbed one of my girlfriends, and we went down, and I went to an NA meeting, and I got to hear my little cousin speak. And I got to meet this guy who I had all these, prejudices against already, these preconceived notions. And the guy's awesome. He actually looks like he's 17. And he's a nice guy, and they're still together to this day. It's two and a half years later. He treats you really good. But my mind, it was a great example of my mind, where it wants to go. Where it wants to go, it's all bad. It's all bad. Let me tell you a story about vegetables real quick. I hate vegetables. One of my second or third sponsor I had in the program. I'm talking to this guy on the phone. And I know his wife. His wife is in the program. I think she spoke down here earlier this year. She's got about 35 years. She's a tough cookie. And I know her mother, and her mother is a tough cookie. And I'm talking to my sponsor, who's married to this woman, and his mother-in-law lives with them. And I was like, "How was your day? What'd you do today?" He's like, "It was good. I was just kind of lounging around. He was retired." Lounging around, he's like, "I made the girls dinner. What'd you make?" It's like meatloaf and mashed potatoes. And I went and told Miss Charlotte, his mother-in-law, who lived with them, "Hey, I made meatloaf and mashed potatoes for you tonight." And she goes, "Do you have peas?" And he's like, "Nah, I don't think we have any peas." And she goes, "Well, I don't eat mashed potatoes without peas." And he goes, "Well, I don't think we have it." She's like, "I don't eat mashed potatoes and meatloaf without peas." And I'm on the phone with this guy. And this shows you what a sober brain and a not so sober brain looks like. And I'm like, oh man, what is this guy going to say to her, right? I'm like waiting for the response. Because I already know what I would say. Like, your leg's broken, get up and get the damn peas yourself, and all this other crazy stuff. And mind you, I love this woman. I know this family very well. I have nothing against them other than the way she told him about the peas. And I was like, "So what'd you do?" He's like, "I just went out and got the peas." Like, let me get this straight. He just went and got the peas. "Yeah, I went and got the peas." I'm like, "Well, what'd you say though?" He's like, "I didn't say anything. I just went and got peas." I'm like, holy cow, I was like one of those aha moments, like, man, I don't want to get the peas. Especially when you talk to me like that, you know what I mean? That was such a good lesson for me. It was such a good lesson for me. Because that's a man who cares about his family, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter how his women talk to him. It does not matter. He's there to help and serve. He's a dedicated member of AA, and he taught me through his actions of how to live, how to do this thing. It's not about what Steve wants anymore. Forget how you feel. I tell my guys that all the time. F your feelings. No one cares about your feelings. We're listening to it on the way down, this guy, Chris D'Elia. He talks about chocolate croissants. It's a great little video. It's like a 10-minute video. Just check it out on YouTube. But basically what he says is, nobody cares about your goddamn croissants, because he brings croissants home to his family and they're all touching it and, whatever. Just get the damn peas, right? That's like my motto today. Just get the damn peas. I have so many good amends stories. I'll leave you with my favorite because it's the most recent. My grandmother, right? So I used to go visit my grandmother, and when I visited my grandmother, I'd borrow money from her and I'd raid her medicine cabinet, and that's what I did for a couple of years, when I got really bad. And that was the extent of my visits to grandma, outside of, holiday functions, which 9 out of 10 times I wasn't even invited to, towards the end. And when I got sober, I obviously had to go make an amends to her, and I made an amends. I made a verbal and a financial amends to her, and a living amends. I know that's not in our literature, but I dedicated time to go visit her as much as I could and bring my girls, because she loved my girls. And when my grandmother moved out of her house into her apartment, the one thing she complained about was, it was a bare apartment. There was nothing on the walls, no nothing. She said it didn't feel like home. So she said, I'd like to get some pictures of it. And my wife was like, all right, let's do that for Grandma. Excuse me. So I said, all right, that's easy enough. So then my wife comes up with this like blueprint of, how we're gonna hang these picture frames on a wall. She came up with a 12-foot wide spread, right, of like 20 picture frames, a couple shelves, a clock, some paintings, and she had it all laid out. And I'm looking at this thing like, oh my God, like, you need like a geometry degree just to do this. And it took me a long time to kind of get all the measurements right, where it'd be like symmetrical and nice and even. And we went over there one day and we hung it all up. And she was thrilled, like over the moon. She had pictures of all her kids and grandkids, and everybody was up on this giant wall, and it was great. She was just so ecstatic. And, sadly last year my grandmother passed away. And, my mom and her 3 sisters all came up to me and said, we want you to write the eulogy because Grandma always talked about you. You were her favorite. And I was blown away. Only in AA does some guy who robs their grandmother get a chance to eulogize their grandmother. And I say that because that don't happen unless I make that amends and I change. It doesn't happen just saying sorry. It happens making the amends and actually living out the amends, and taking care of my grandmother. And I was honored, and I have social anxiety. I don't like standing up in front of people. So when they asked me to eulogize her, my first thought was like fear, right? Like I can't stand up in a church in front of 100 people and eulogize this woman. Like I wanted to say no, but you guys taught me to say yes. And I did. And, from doing all these speaking commitments, I was able to stand up in front of 100 people at a church and eulogize them. When I first came into AA, there's no way you get me up here. There's absolutely no way you get me up here. But you guys encouraged me, especially these guys in the back. My first speaking commitment, there was 12 guys who showed up for my home group. 12 guys. I was blown away. Absolutely blown away. Like, why would anybody show up for me? But that's what we do. So I get to the church. I'm trying to hold it together, man. I got this paper. I got this eulogy written out. And in that eulogy, I'm going to talk about this photo wall, right? Because it's one of my core memories I had with my grandmother, too. And I'm going to talk about it and how thrilled she was and how happy I was to be able to do that for her. And the priest gets up there. And, my grandmother was a dedicated member of the Catholic Church, and she did a lot of service with them. And the priest was telling some stories, and he goes, last time I went to visit Adelaide at her apartment, and I went there, and this woman just absolutely loved her family, he's saying. As soon as I walked in the door, Adelaide just took me right over to this wall that had all these photos on it that I installed. And we sat at that wall for an hour, and she went through every single photo telling me, this is my kids, this is my grandkids, this is my nieces and nephews and everybody. And he's standing up there talking about this wall, and I'm looking at my eulogy paper like, I'm about to go talk about this wall. Like, this is the craziest thing ever, And I'm like tearing up. I'm trying to hold it together, and I'm like, this is AA. This only happens in AA. Where else are you going to get this? You know what I mean? And I'm just like so grateful, and I get up there and I eulogize her, and I'm just like, my God, thank God. Thank God for this program, what it's given me. It's given me a life back, and I can people actually want me in their life. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. One of the biggest gifts I have today, well, besides my family, is watching other people get back with their family. You know, some of the guys that I sponsor, it's just absolutely amazing. It's so cool to me to actually get a sponsee that takes advice, right? Because I was never that guy. But a guy who's like, hey, I'll ask him, can you meet me at 5:30 a.m.? Because that's like all the time I got. And they're like, yeah, I'll be there. Like, that's amazing, you know? And trying to help out their family. You know, I've had many opportunities to help out the spouses and the parents of some of these guys, and what a joy, you know, what an absolute joy. You know, I had a sponsee go out, and I had about a year and a half, and it was crazy. You know, I got to go back to his house and help his mom, like, clean out his room. You know, I got to go to the funeral. I got to meet his daughter, his estranged daughter, who we never got a chance really to meet. I got to see that. It's just so many lessons I've learned in this program, and that's why I keep coming back. You know, there's a lot of people that don't make it, but there's just enough. There's just enough that do make it that keeps you going. You know, because if it was all doom and gloom, I wouldn't want to do it. Just being honest, you know, I don't think I could handle it emotionally. But there's a lot of guys that make it. And I just want to give a shout out to all the guys that came here today. I love you guys. You guys saved my ass. You know, when I first came into that home group, you know, I was beaten. And these guys lifted me up. These guys showed me love. And I remember on my 30th day, to the day, when I walked in that room, I knew it was my 30th day. And they all knew it was my 30th day. You know, everybody's coming up to me, hey, congrats on 30. I'm like, how do you even know? They remember. Or they wrote it down. Or they did something. But they cared enough to make sure they remembered that day. You know, and I felt a part of. And ever since, like, they have no idea what I would do for them. Don't tell them that. But I would do a lot, you know. Thank you guys. Thank AA for giving me a life back. You know, I love AA. I can't say it enough. AA saved my life. You guys have saved my life. And for that, I'm forever grateful and indebted to you guys. Thank you for letting me share.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brian, and I'm an alcoholic. First and foremost, I want to thank Steve for coming out here tonight, delivering an incredible message of hope and recovery to our group here. A couple of quick announcements, and we'll wrap up the meeting here. Again, the food and the fellowship for this group starts every week at 8 o'clock. Feel free to show up early, enjoy the coffee, the refreshments that we put out. If you do want to get involved with some service with this group, we always have service positions available. As Ron said, we could use someone to help out in the kitchen there. Our group also, as he said, is involved with commitments in hospitals and institutions in the area. So if you're interested in doing something like that, we got one tomorrow night. You can see me, see any home group member after the meeting. There's always the meeting after the meeting. If you're out there, if you're new, if you're struggling, hang out with us, grab some numbers. We'd love to talk with you. I hope help you get into the solution a little bit. If you do want to help us out with some service work after the meeting, we could always use help putting away the chairs. The chairs out in the front here and on the sides will go away. The ones on the tables back there stay exactly where they are. It's customary for us to thank our speakers. They come here on their own time and expense. We usually form a line in the front here, and we thank our speakers personally for coming out. Thanks to everybody for helping out with the meeting. Thanks to those who helped set up. Thanks to our greeters, our readers. Thanks to Ms. Kay for taking care of the kitchen back there. And most importantly, let's thank our speaker, Steve. One more time. If you do care to join us, we have a nice way of closing. We're going to form a circle. We're circling up now again. So. And we'll close down the meeting, as always, with a brief moment of silence for the still sick and suffering alcoholic inside and outside of these rooms, followed by our Lord's Prayer. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, power, and glory forever. Amen.
What about the man?